The back booth at Estrella's had held the same four men every Thursday for 9 years, and the woman who brought them their coffee had written down every single time in pencil on a paper pad, with the date in the corner, because that was how her father had taught her to take an order in 2004, and Nora Bennett had never once seen a reason to change. Nobody in that building had looked directly at her in a decade. They thought she was furniture that carried plates. And on the night 30, men came through the door with rifles and dropped their eyes to the floor for the quiet man in the corner. The quiet man did not look at the rifles. He looked at Nora. "You've been writing us down," he said, "for 11 years, and Nora Bennett, 250 pounds of a woman who had been invisible since she was 19, put down the coffee pot and said, 9. The first 2 years I worked days. Miami does not cool off in August. It only gets darker." Estrella's cafe sat on a corner in Hialeah, under a sign that had been rewired so many times it hummed at a frequency Nora could feel in her back teeth. 22 stools, 11 booths, a flat top that had been seasoned by 4 decades of pan-con beefsteak, and 2 ceiling fans that turned all night at a speed that moved the heat around without ever reducing it. Nora started at 9 and finished at 6. By 11, the storm had come in off the glades, the kind of August rain that doesn't arrive so much as land drumming the flat roof, turning the parking lot into a sheet of black glass with the neon crawling across it. The regulars came in shaking water off their arms, the dispatchers from the yard on East 4th, 2 nurses off the night shift at Palmetto, a man who sold air conditioning units and had been proposing to Nora as a joke every Friday for 6 years, and who did not understand, and never would, what it cost her to laugh at it every single time. Her feet had stopped being feet at around 1 in the morning. That was normal. The uniform was polyester mint green and ordered by a man who bought the same 3 sizes every year, regardless of who worked there, which meant Nora's pulled across the back when she reached and rode up when she carried. And she had spent 11 years adjusting it with one hand roughly 900 times a shift. She was 34. She was, by the scale in the back hallway that she had stopped standing on in 2019, somewhere around 250 pounds. She had been the biggest woman in every room she had entered since she was 15, and she had a complete working map of what that meant. The teenagers who filmed her from the corner booth, the men who said "sweetheart" with a little extra air in it, the women who ordered dressing on the side and said, "I don't know how you do it on your feet all day," while looking at her stomach. Nora had built something over those years that was not quite armor and not quite indifference. It was closer to a filing system. Everything came in. Nothing got a reaction. All of it got written down somewhere. That was the part nobody knew about. Her father had been particular about exactly one thing. Thomas Bennett had opened this room in 1994 and called it Bennett's, in white letters on a red awning, and he had run it for 17 years on a theory he repeated so often that Nora could hear it in his voice at 3 in the morning 20 years later. A ticket is a promise. Write it, date it, and never throw it away, because someday a man is going to stand in front of you and say a thing didn't happen, and you're going to be the only one in the room who can prove it did. So she wrote her tickets by hand. Even now. Even after Estrella's went to a tablet system in 2018 and everybody else stopped. Table, time, date in the corner, who ordered what. And, because her father had taught her that too, know the room, know who's in it, a little shorthand in the margin for who was sitting with whom. She had 11 years of them in a plastic storage tub under her bed in a 1-bedroom off West 12th. She did not know why she kept them. It was not a plan. It was a habit she had inherited from a dead man, the way other people inherit a mole or a temper. The thing that had happened to her father was this. In the winter of the year Nora turned 22, 4 men began coming into Bennett's on Thursday nights. They took the back booth. They paid cash, and they tipped well. And for a year and a half they were nothing but pleasant. In the spring of the second year, a company Thomas Bennett had never heard of started running money through his registers, not a great deal at a time. 6,000 or 8,000 a week entered as catering deposits against events that never took place, out again through a linen service that owned no linen. His signature was on the account authorizations. It was a very good signature. Later, 3 separate examiners would say it was one of the better ones they'd seen. Federal agents came through the door on a Wednesday morning in March while the flat top was still hot. Thomas Bennett said the same 11 words for 2 years, to his lawyer, to a jury, to a judge, to his daughter through the scratched window of a visiting room in Coleman. I never opened an account I didn't open. Somebody used my name. He got 8 years. He got 17 months of them. He died on a Sunday morning in a federal facility 90 miles from his own restaurant of a cardiac event that his own physician had described 4 months earlier as extremely unlikely. The building went to the note holder. The note holder sold it inside a year to a corporation that had been formed the previous spring, and that corporation reopened the room under a different name with the same flat top, and the incorporation filing had one signature on it. C. Bruno. Nora had that filing. It sat on top of the order pads in the tub under her bed. She had gone back to work in her father's dining room 8 months after he died for the men who took it from him. Because she needed the job, and her mother needed the aid, and because she was 23 years old and had not yet understood that there is a difference between endurance and a plan. By 34, she understood it. She just could not see, from where she stood, that she had been quietly building the second one the entire time. Margaret Bennett had a bad heart and a good mind, and lived in a second-floor unit in Westchester with a stairway she should not have been using. She had been a payroll clerk for the Dade County school system for 29 years. She had a folder, an actual manila folder kept in a kitchen drawer, of every letter she had written about her husband's case to congressmen and journalists, and an Innocence Project in Gainesville 41 letters and every reply, of which there were 9 and all 9 were form letters. You should throw those out, Nora said, roughly once a year. You first, said Margaret, roughly once a year, meaning the tub under the bed, and neither of them ever threw anything out. The cardiologist wanted a procedure done in October, and the number attached to it was $19,000. Gerald Thorne had managed Estrella's for 6 years, and had never worked a single shift on the floor of anything in his life. He came in at 11 that night in a golf shirt with the restaurant's logo on it, which he wore the way a small-town deputy wears a badge, and he found Nora at the coffee station. Bennett. Quick thing. I've got a 6 top on 10. They'll live. He didn't ask. He never asked. He just started walking, and she followed, because 11 years had taught her exactly what happens to the women who don't. I'm cutting nights back. You're going from 5 to 3. Nora stopped in the hallway by the walk-in. 3. Gerald. That's under 30 hours. It's a labor number. It's not a statement about you. He was already on his phone. Also, Thursday. The back boot's coming in, and it's a bigger party than usual, so I want the floor sharp. And listen. He looked up, briefly, at her whole body, and did the thing with his hand, a little circle in the air at the level of her waist, the way you'd indicate a stain on a wall. Apron on straight. We're on display Thursday. You know. I know, Nora said. Great, he went. He had never once in 6 years thought about that gesture as a gesture. It was simply how he pointed at her. Nora stood in the hallway with her hands loose at her sides for about 11 seconds. Then she went back out and dropped 6 plates on table 10 and remembered every modification without writing them down, because she had already written them down, because she always wrote them down. Grace Molina had waited tables in that room since it still had the red awning. She was 62, 4'11", and had once thrown a man out of the parking lot with a broom in 2007. She had also, in 22 years, never used the phrase, "Are you sure you want that?" to another human being. He cut your nights, Grace said, refilling the sugar caddies. He labor-numbered them. Grace slid a caddy down the counter. You know what that man's never done? Carried 4 plates. 22 years I've been here. 6 of them his, and I've never once seen him carry 4 plates. She glanced toward the back. The boot's coming Thursday. He said. He didn't tell you who's in it this time. Nora looked up. Vitel, said Grace. Nora had grown up in this city. You did not have to know anything about the men on Palm Avenue to know the name. You knew it the way you knew which streets flood. Not from experience, just from the fact that everybody around you had been careful about it for as long as you'd been alive. Since when? Since about a month. Grace's voice dropped. The four that have had that booth for 9 years. Delfino and them. Those are Bruno's people, honey. Everybody knows it. They've been sitting back there since before your daddy. She stopped. She started again. The point is, for 9 years that booth's been one family, and now it's two. That doesn't happen. It does not, Grace agreed. So either somebody's making peace, or somebody's making a mistake, and I've been in this business too long to think it's peace. The quiet man came in on a Tuesday, alone, at 10 past midnight, 3 days before the Thursday, and sat at the counter instead of the booth. That was the first thing Nora noticed. Men like that don't sit at counters. Counters have your back to the room. He was maybe 40. Not big, 6 feet. Lean. Built by work rather than by a gym. Charcoal suit, no tie, wet through the shoulders from 30 feet of parking lot. Dark hair with a streak of early gray above the left temple. And a face with absolutely no traffic on it, not blank, not hiding anything, simply not broadcasting. He put his back to the room and his eyes on the mirror behind the pie case which covered the door. And Nora, who had spent 11 years watching people watch each other in this room, understood the whole thing in about 4 seconds and decided not to say a word about it. Coffee. Anything with it? No. She poured it. He drank it black and did not touch his phone, which by itself made him one of maybe 6 people who had come through that door all summer. At 20 past, he said, "You didn't ring that in." Nora glanced at him. He was looking at the pad in her apron pocket, where she'd written it out in pencil. Table 0, 12, 10 a.m. Date in the corner. I did ring it in. I write it first. Why? Because that's how I was taught. By who? Man who used to own this building, said Nora Bennett, and turned around to put the pot back and did not see what happened on the face behind her, because there was nothing to see. There never was. But he sat there for another 40 minutes, and he left $20 on a $2 check, and at the door he stopped and said one thing. "What's your name?" "It's on the tag." "I can read the tag," said the man. "I'm asking you." Nora looked at him across 11 booths. Nora Bennett. He put his hand on the door and stood there for a second and a half, which is a very long time to stand in an open doorway in August rain, and then he went out into it. Grace came out of the kitchen with a rack of glasses. "Was that—" "I don't know," said Nora. "I think so. Thursday it rained harder. The back booth filled at 11. 4 Bruno men. Delfino, the 2 brothers, and the older one, everybody called Tio, who had never once said a word to Nora in 9 years, and then at 11:23 more, and one of them was the man from the counter. Nora worked them the way she always worked them. Fast, warm, forgettable, gone. Coffee, water, the Palomilla rare for Delfino, no onion for Tio, a materva for the younger brother. And she wrote it all down, table 9, 11:20 p.m. The date in the corner and in the margin, in the shorthand her father had invented for a busy Friday in 1997. She put down who was sitting with whom. It was going fine until Camilla Ashford came in at midnight. Camilla was 35 and had money that had been in Coral Gables long enough to have opinions. And she arrived out of the rain in white linen with 2 friends and a phone held at the exact angle. Women hold them when they're filming, without saying they're filming. She was there for one reason, and the reason was sitting in the back booth and had been declining her calls since March. Nora brought them a menu. "Oh, we're not eating," Camilla said without looking up. "God, no. Just, do you have anything that isn't fried?" Grilled snapper, black beans, salad. Salad, dressing on the side. And I mean genuinely on the side, not— She made a small motion with her fingers. "You know." "Yes, ma'am." Nora went to put it in, and on her way back through the narrow gap between the counter stools and table 7, the gap that has been 11 inches too tight since 1994, the gap her father used to complain about, the gap Nora had turned her body sideways to get through roughly 40,000 times. Camilla Ashford pushed her chair back without looking. Nora's hip caught it. The tray went. 4 glasses of ice water across the floor tile. The room turned. And Camilla said, loudly enough for every one of the 29 people in that dining room, in a voice bright with delight at her own timing. "Sweetheart, you have got to give the rest of us a heads up. There's a whole weather system attached to that." Her friends laughed, and Gerald Thorne, standing at the register 8 feet away with a check presenter in his hand, laughed too. One small huff through the nose, the deniable kind, the coward's portion. Nora Bennett knelt down on the floor of the room her father had built and picked up 4 glasses. She did not cry because she had not cried where a person could see her since 2016, and she was not going to start under her own ceiling fans. She said, "I'll get you a fresh water," and she stood up and she took the tray to the back. Grace found her in the walk-in 90 seconds later with her forehead against a rack of case tomatoes. "Honey, I'm okay." "You are not okay, and you don't have to be, and you've got about 2 minutes before Gerald notices, so use them." Nora used them. Then she went back out onto the floor and picked up the water pitcher and did not see on her way past table 9 that the man in the charcoal suit had put down his coffee and was no longer looking at anybody at the table. What happened next took 90 seconds, and Nora would spend the rest of her life being able to account for every one of them. Delfino got up from the back booth to go to the men's room. On his way, he stopped at Camilla Ashford's table because they knew each other. Everybody in that half of the county knew each other. And he leaned down and said something, and Camilla laughed. And both of them looked over at Nora at the coffee station, and Delfino said at a volume he had chosen on purpose, "They ought to charge her rent for the aisle." The dining room laughed. Not all of it. Enough of it. And a chair moved at table 9. The man in the charcoal suit did not stand up quickly. That was the thing Nora remembered. He put his napkin down, and he squared it, and he stood the way a man stands when he's going to be a while. And he crossed the floor of that dining room without hurrying at all. And by the time he was halfway, the noise in the room had begun to come apart. Not silence. Nobody announced anything. It was more like a radio losing a station. The laughter thinned out. Then the conversation at table 4 dropped a level. Then somebody's fork stopped moving, and by the time he reached Delfino, you could hear the compressor on the pie case and the rain on the roof, and nothing else in between. Marco. Delfino turned around with his mouth already open. Whatever he was going to say did not arrive. "Say it again," said the man in the charcoal suit. His voice was not loud. It did not have to be. It had the flatness of something being read off a page. You made a joke about a woman's body in front of 40 people. "Say it again so everybody can hear it a second time." Delfino's face went through 4 expressions in a row. "Damiano, come on, it was." "Say it again." "It was nothing. It was a joke, man." "Then it'll be funny twice." Nobody in that dining room moved. Gerald Thorne had gone the color of the tile. Camilla Ashford had put her phone face down on the table, which was, in its way, the most frightening thing Nora had ever seen a person do. "You've eaten in this room every Thursday for 9 years, Damiano Vitale said. She has poured your coffee 240 times. You do not know her name. I know you don't, because I watched you order from her 40 minutes ago without using it." He let that sit for 1 full second. "Her name is Nora." Delfino said nothing. "Say good night to her. Use it." There are things that are worse than being hit. And Marco Delfino discovered one of them standing on a wet tile floor in front of a dining room full of people who would be telling this story for a year. "Good night, Nora," he said. "You're going to leave now," Damiano said. "You're going to walk. If you run, I'll take it personally." He walked. His 3 friends went with him. Nobody paid. And then Damiano Vitale turned and looked across the room at Camilla Ashford and did not say one single word to her. Just looked. For about 4 seconds, and Camilla Ashford picked up her bag and left $100 on a table with 2 salads on it and went out into the rain. And she would not be able to get a call answered anywhere in Miami-Dade by the end of the month. The room started breathing again in pieces. Nora was still standing at the coffee station with the pot in her hand. He came over. "I apologize for that," he said. "For all of it, including the part in the aisle before I got up. I should have gotten up faster." "You don't have to. I'm aware of what I have to do." He looked at the pot in her hand until she put it down. You've got another 5 hours on this shift. 6. Then I won't keep you. He went back to the booth. He stayed until 3, and he did not look at her again. And she understood some hours later that this was deliberate, that he had decided the kindest thing available to him was to stop making her the thing everyone in the room was watching. 20 minutes to 4, the parking lot lit up like a runway. Nora was wiping down the counter when the light came across the ceiling, hard white from low down 5 sets of headlights swinging in off the boulevard at once, and then a 6th, and the puddles in the lot threw all of it up onto the walls of the dining room in shivering sheets. Grace said, "Oh, Jesus." There were 9 people left in the restaurant. The 2 nurses, a man asleep in booth 2, the dispatchers. Gerald, who came out of the office at a run and then stopped so fast he skidded. The doors opened. They came in fast, and they came in quiet, and there were about 30 of them. And they were not what Nora had spent her whole life being told to expect from 30 men coming through a door at 4 in the morning. There were no masks. Nobody shouted. They were in dark suits and tactical vests over the suits soaked to the shoulders, and they had rifles on slings across their chests. And they moved through that dining room like a crew that had done it 40 times, 2 to each door, 2 to the kitchen pass, 2 on the front glass, the rest fanning wide and going still. One of the nurses screamed. Somebody's coffee cup hit the floor. Nora's hands went flat on the counter, and she thought, with a clarity that surprised her, "The register is right here, and I am the closest person to it, and this is how it happens." Not one of them looked at the register. Not one of them looked at Gerald, or at the nurses, or at the safe under the counter that everybody in Hialeah knew was under the counter. The biggest man Nora had ever seen came down the center aisle. 6'5" easily, shoulders that had to consider the doorframe, a nose broken and set by somebody in a hurry, rain running off his jaw. He walked past 30 feet of soft targets without a flicker and stopped 4 feet from the back booth, and every single armed man in that dining room dropped his eyes to the floor at the same time. Enzo Marchetti put his hand flat over his heart. "Boss," he said. Damiano Vitale did not stand up. He finished writing something on the back of a check, folded it once, and looked up. "How bad?" "The container yard on 12th. They came at it 40 minutes ago." Enzo's voice was low, but it carried in that room the way a bass note carries through a wall. "We hold it. 2 of ours are cut up. Nothing that won't heal." But they knew the rotation, boss. They knew it to the minute. The rain hammered the roof. Nora Bennett stood behind a counter she had wiped down 11,000 times in a mint green polyester uniform, 2 sizes too small, and stared at the quiet man who had sat at her counter drinking $3 coffee and asked her who taught her to write a ticket. "Salvatore," said Damiano. An old man Nora had not even registered rose out of the second seat of booth 9. 79, maybe. Glasses. A guayabera. He had been sitting in her section for 3 hours, and she had brought him a cortadito, and he had said thank you. "Don't move on it tonight," Salvatore Conti said. "You move tonight. You're moving on somebody's schedule, and somebody made you a schedule." "Agreed." Damiano stood. He buttoned his jacket. "Enzo, nobody goes near 12th until Sunday. Pull the yard crews. Everybody who knew that rotation gets written down on a piece of paper tonight. And I want the paper, not a phone call." "Yes, boss?" "And put 4 men on this building until it closes and 4 on the parking lot." Enzo hesitated for exactly half a second. "On the diner." "On the diner." "On the diner." That was when Damiano Vitale turned around and looked at Nora across her father's dining room, and 30 men with rifles turned and looked at whatever he was looking at, and Nora had the extremely strange experience of being, for the first time in her adult life, the most visible object in a room. He came over to the counter. "You should sit down," he said. "I'm fine. You're gray." "I've been on my feet since 9. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't a smile. It was adjacent to one. "Ms. Bennett," he said, "I need to ask you a question, and I want you to understand before I ask it that you can say no, and if you say no, everything I just ordered still happens. The 4 men outside are there either way. Ask it." How many years of pads do you have? The pie case compressor hummed. How do you know about the pads? Because you told me on Tuesday that you write it first, and you told me who taught you. And I have known who taught you since the first night I walked in here. He put both hands on the counter. I've been sitting in that booth for a month for one reason. Marco Delfino and 3 men have used it every Thursday for 9 years, and I have never been able to put a date on a single one of those meetings, and neither has anybody else. Because they don't carry phones in here, they pay cash, and there is no camera in this building that works. Nora's mouth was completely dry. There's one over the register. It's a housing with nothing in it. It's been empty since 2014. I know, she said. I've known that since 2014. Then you know what I'm asking. Nora Bennett looked at 30 armed men standing in her father's restaurant, and at the manager cowering by the register, and at the empty back booth, and at a plastic tub in her mind that sat under a bed on West 12th with 11 years of dated handwriting in it. I have 9 years of that booth, she said. Every Thursday, table 9, party of 4, time in, time out, what they ordered and who sat with who, in pencil, dated, in my handwriting. And I never threw out a single one because my father told me not to. Salvatore Conti took his glasses off. Damiano, the old man said quietly. Sit her down. They talked in booth 11 until the sky over Hialeah went the color of a nickel. I'm not giving you the tub, Nora said. Enzo Marchetti made a small noise. Damiano did not react at all. Say why? Because you'll use it and burn it, and then it's gone. She had both hands around a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. You want it for a war. I want it for something else. And there's only one of it. Which is what? Nora looked at him. My father did 17 months for a set of accounts he never opened, she said. He said the same 11 words for 2 years, and nobody believed him. And he died 90 miles from this building. And the man who took this building from him has been eating palamilla at table 9 for 9 years while I brought him his water. Her voice did not rise once. So if those pads are worth something, then they're worth it, in front of a federal judge with Cesare Bruno's name attached. In daylight, with my father's name on the same piece of paper, not in a parking lot on 12th Avenue. The rain had stopped. Somewhere behind the building, a truck was backing up. You know what you just said out loud, Damiano said. And who you said it to. Yes, most people don't. I've been carrying trays past your table for a month, said Nora Bennett. You people talk in front of me like I'm a coat rack. I've been listening for 11 years, Mr. Vitale. I just never had anybody worth telling. Salvatore Conti laughed. One short, dry, astonished sound like something coming loose. Then here's what I'll offer you, Damiano said. Nothing about the tub. I'll take copies when you decide, if you decide, and you keep the originals in your own hands the entire time. In exchange, your mother's procedure in October is paid on Monday, and I want that whether or not you ever hand me one page. That's not a deal. That's charity. It's neither. It's the price of me being able to sleep. He said it evenly. There's a second half, and this one is a real ask. Cesare Bruno knew a rotation tonight that 11 people knew. I need to find out which of the 11, and the man is careful with everybody in my world and careless with everybody outside it. He met her eyes. You are the most invisible person in the most useful room in this county. I'd like to keep you exactly that invisible for about 6 more weeks. And what does that cost me? Every ordinary thing you have, said Damiano Vitale. Permanently. If this goes the way I think it goes, by October people will know your face who have never had a reason to learn it. Some of them will come looking. You will never again be a woman nobody notices. And that will save you on some nights, and it will almost kill you on others. Nora sat in a booth in her father's dining room at 6 in the morning with her feet screaming and 11 years of being a coat rack sitting on her back like a wet coat. Nobody's ever offered me a job at this table, she said. Not once. Not since I was 19. I'm aware. Then yes, said Nora. Gerald Thorne was gone within 9 days. He was not threatened. Nobody spoke to him. What happened was that on the following Monday, a Delaware entity acquired the corporation that held the building, and on Tuesday, an accounts review turned up 6 years of skim tip pool, $41,000 of it, taken in amounts small enough that nobody had ever bothered to reconcile it. Off Nora, off Grace, off two girls on days who had no papers and would never have said a word about it. He was walked out on a Wednesday with a box. Grace Molina watched him cross the parking lot and said with enormous serenity, 22 years I've been telling somebody about that man. Who did you tell? Everybody, honey. Nobody ever asked me twice. She snapped a bar towel. You know what he's doing now? He's applying. And he'll keep applying because somebody let it be known. And in this town, when somebody lets a thing be known, it stays known. They put Nora on days for the first time since 2013, and they raised her to $52,000 a year, and they installed 2 ceiling fans that actually moved air, and Nora quietly requisitioned a case of order pads. The dress happened in September, and it happened because of the Ashford Marine Conservancy benefit at Vizcaya, which was the one night of the year every dirty dollar in that county put on a tuxedo and stood next to a senator. Fabienne Cross arrived at the house on Palm Avenue with a rack and 2 assistants, and an expression like a man asked to solve an unsolvable geometry problem. So he said, walking a slow circle around Nora. Okay, here's the thinking. Long line, vertical, something forgiving through the middle. Take the eye up. He pulled a black column dress off the rack, high-necked, floor-length, cut with the deliberate vagueness of a hotel curtain. We minimize, we simplify, we let the room look somewhere else. And that's a kindness. That's genuinely a kindness, because nobody wants to walk into Vizcaya and be the thing everyone's take it back. Damiano was in the doorway. Mr. Vitale, I was just walking her through. Take the black one to the van. Take both gray ones. He came into the room without raising his voice at all, and Fabienne Cross's face began to change 1 degree at a time. Every woman you've dressed for me has walked into a room looking like she was hoping to be forgiven for something. She isn't asking anybody in that building for anything. Don't put her in an apology. Sir, that's not how the I Marchetti will help you with the rack. 90 seconds. Gone. Nora stood in the middle of a room with a rail of nothing. I could have handled him. I know you could. Then why? Then why? Because you've handled men like that since you were 15, Damiano said, and you're going to spend 6 weeks handling considerably worse ones, and I'd rather you spent it on Cesare Bruno. He looked at the empty rack. Also because he was wrong. What do you want to wear? And Nora, who had answered that question with something dark every time it had been asked of her since she was a teenager, said the true thing instead. Red, she said. Not a dark red. A real one. Something with structure in it that holds a line and doesn't drape over me apologizing. Her jaw set. My father painted that awning red in 1994 because he said a person should be able to find you from the other end of the street. She wore it into Vizcaya on the 11th of September, and the room noticed. Not a hush. Those rooms don't hush. But a wave of adjustment went through it. 400 people revising something simultaneously, and Nora Bennett walked through the middle of it with her chin level and did not lower her eyes at a single person. Camilla Ashford saw her from beside the coquina fountain and put her glass down on a passing tray without looking at it. Nora, she said, when there was no longer a way to avoid it. Nora! Wow! You look... Camilla, I want to say, about the diner. That whole thing. That was a joke. It was a bad joke. And honestly, if I'd had any idea who you... That's the part I want you to sit with, Nora said pleasantly and moved past her. She learned things at that benefit that nobody else in the building could have learned, for exactly the reason Damiano had said. She learned them by standing near the bar and being the largest woman in the room. Which meant that for the first 40 minutes she was, as ever, scenery. And scenery hears everything. She heard the Miami-Dade port commissioner named Eleanor Prescott tell a table that the 12th Avenue Container Yard's inspection schedule was under review, which was 6 days before anybody was supposed to know that. She heard a man from the corporation that had bought her father's building, refer to a Sunday meeting in Coral Gables in front of 3 people who visibly did not know about it. And she heard, at 11:40, standing behind a column with a glass of water, a voice she recognized instantly, because she had taken its coffee order 200 times. Renzo Fontana had been Damiano Vitale's underboss for 9 years. He had carried Matteo Vitale's casket 4 years ago. He had a daughter at Belen, and a laugh you could hear through a wall, and he was standing on the other side of a limestone column at a Marine Conservancy gala saying quietly into a phone, "No, it's the same as always. They run it Thursday nights out of the diner. Yeah, the one on the corner. 9 years, same booth." Nora did not move. She did not breathe. "Because he can't put a date on any of it, that's why," Renzo said. "There's no camera and there's no paper. There has never been any paper." And then he laughed and said the sentence that Nora Bennett would carry with her into a federal courtroom 11 months later. "Relax. It's a diner full of nobodies." She did not run to Damiano. She went to the powder room and stood in a stall for 90 seconds until her hands worked, and then she came out, took a cocktail napkin and a pen from the bar, and wrote it down. Time, date in the corner, location, North Colonnade, 3rd column, subject, words, verbatim, in the order they were said. 2 witnesses within earshot she could name. Then she folded it into the front of her dress and went back out and smiled at a state senator for 11 minutes. She told Damiano in the car at 2 in the morning, and she watched a man decide, in real time, not to become somebody else. He did not shout. He put his head back against the seat and closed his eyes and stayed absolutely still for about 40 seconds. And when he spoke, his voice was so level it was worse than shouting. "He carried my brother. I know. He was in my kitchen in July. I know." Damiano opened his eyes. "Say the last part again." He said, "It's a diner full of nobodies. Something happened in that car that Nora felt in her spine." "Don't," she said. "Nora, your father's dead. Your brother's dead. If you do the parking lot version of this, you will feel better for 4 hours, and then Cesare Bruno will be eating on Sunday, and you'll be a photograph on Channel 7. She turned in the seat toward him. "My father had the truth and no paper, and it killed him. I have got 9 years of paper in a plastic tub under a bed in Hialeah. Let me do it my way." Damiano Vitale looked at her for a long moment in the dark of a moving car. "What's your way?" "Daylight," said Nora Bennett. "On paper, with their own names on it. And I want to be in the room." They came for her on the 29th of September, and they came the way she had always been afraid of, which was through the ordinary part of her life. Margaret's aide came 4 hours a day, 9 to 1, a woman named Delia who had been with them 2 years. On the 29th, Delia's mother had a fall in Homestead, and a replacement was dispatched by the agency at 7:40 in the morning. And at 8:50, a man Nora had never seen was standing in the breezeway of a second-floor unit in Westchester, holding a clipboard. Nora had come at 8, because she came at 8 on Mondays. He had the right polo shirt. He had the right laminate. He had the agency's actual scheduling app open on the actual phone. And he was wearing shoes. That was all. Hard-soled dress shoes, brown, decent ones, on a home health aide arriving for a 4-hour shift that consists almost entirely of standing up and sitting down on a tile floor. Nora had spent 11 years on her feet in a restaurant, and she had spent 11 years looking at the shoes of every single person who came through the door, because that is what you learn to look at when you are the one who has to mop. Nobody who works a floor for a living wears those shoes. Nobody. Not once. Not ever. "You're early," Nora said, smiling. "Hang on. I've got to get her meds out of the safe. The lock's a nightmare. Give me 2 minutes." She shut the door. She locked it. She crossed the apartment in 6 steps and got her mother out of the chair. 68 years old, bad heart, furious, silent, fast, and put her in the bathroom, which was the only room in that unit with no exterior wall, and she pressed her phone into Margaret's hands and said 4 words. "Lock it. Call Enzo." Then Nora Bennett went back out into her mother's living room, because there was a man on the other side of a hollow cord door, and 11 minutes between her and anybody else, and she was not going to let him get past her into that hallway. She did not look for a weapon. She looked at the room the way she looked at a dining room at the start of a shift. And she saw the thing that was actually there. A second-floor unit with an exterior breezeway, a screen door, and a set of concrete stairs with a metal handrail 11 feet from the entrance, wet from the sprinklers that ran at 8:40 every single morning of the year. She opened the front door and stepped out onto the breezeway. "Sorry, she's in the bathroom. We've got to do this out here." She gets embarrassed. He came out after her, onto the wet concrete in those shoes. And Nora Bennett, 250 pounds, of a woman who had carried 11-plate trays through an 11-inch gap for 11-inch gap for 11 years, who had a center of gravity that no man had ever once taken seriously, and who had been shoved, jostled, and squeezed past by strangers every day of her adult life without ever once being permitted to push back, put her shoulder into him. It was not elegant. It was physics. He went into the handrail and over the third step and down 11 feet of wet concrete stairs, and he did not get up, and the thing in his waistband went into the hedge. And Nora did not go after it, because she had already decided somewhere in the last 2 seconds that she was never in this life going to be the woman who reaches for the gun on the ground and loses. She sat down on the top step instead. She put her back against her mother's door and her feet against the rail, and she braced there, all of her everything she had. And when he started to move at the bottom of the stairs, she said, in a perfectly level voice, "The next time you get up, I'm coming down them." He stayed where he was. Enzo Marchetti came around the corner of the building at 9:04 with 2 men, and after that, Nora did not watch. Damiano got there at 9:11. He had driven from Palm Avenue, which is not 11 minutes. He came up those stairs 3 at a time and stopped in front of her, and Nora watched the most contained man she had ever met come apart at the seams. His hands were shaking. His breathing was wrong. Something behind his eyes had come completely off its hinges, and he was holding it down by force, the way you hold a door in a storm. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Your mother?" "In the bathroom. She's fine." She's furious. Nora's teeth had started to chatter now that it was over. Damiano, he had the app. He had the real app, with her real schedule in it. And Delia's mother fell in Homestead this morning, which means somebody knew inside of 40 minutes. "I know." "It was the shoes," she said, and then, humiliatingly, started to cry. That's all it was. It was his shoes. He had good shoes on, and nobody who works a floor. He kissed her on the landing of a second-floor walk-up in Westchester at 9:12 in the morning, with the sprinklers still running. It was not gentle and was not meant to be. It had the whole drive from Palm Avenue in it, every light, every second of not knowing. One hand at the back of her neck and one flat between her shoulder blades, and he pulled her in like a man closing a wound, and Nora took a fistful of his shirt and pulled back just as hard. When they came apart, he kept his forehead against hers. "Nobody comes to this building again," he said very low. "Not a doorbell, not a phone call, nobody." Behind the bathroom door, Margaret Bennett, who had heard all of it, said, at considerable volume, "Is it over? Because I would like to come out, and I would like to meet him." Salvatore Conti listened to the whole thing that night at a table on Palm Avenue, and then took his glasses off and pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. "Who knew the aid's schedule?" he said. "4 people," said Nora. "Me, my mother, the agency." She stopped. And I put it on the emergency contact form at the diner in July," she said slowly. "The one Gerald made everybody fill out for the new ownership. Address, next of kin, care schedule." It went to corporate. Damiano set his glass down. "Renzo runs corporate," he said. Enzo Marchetti spoke for the first time. "Boss, if it's Renzo, it's been Renzo for 9 years, and that means 12th Avenue, and that means the rotation, and that means—" He stopped. "Say it," said Damiano. "That means Matteo," said Enzo Marchetti. Nobody at that table said anything for a long time. Then Salvatore Conti put his glasses back on and looked at Nora Bennett, 62 hours after she had thrown a man down a flight of stairs with her shoulder, and said, "Miss Bennett." How many Thursdays did Renzo Fontana eat in that dining room? Nora went very still. He didn't, she said. Not at the booth. Never at the booth. Her hand came up to her mouth. He came in twice a year. Alone. Always the counter. Always after 2 in the morning. And he always. She stopped. He always what? Said Damiano. He always paid the whole table's check on his way out, said Nora. Table 9s. 9 years. Twice a year he'd walk past me at the register on his way out the door and pay a check for 4 men he wasn't sitting with in cash. And I wrote it down every single time because that's how I was taught. And I never once thought about it because I have never once been paid to think in that building. The tub came out from under the bed on the 1st of October. It took 9 days for 2 federal attorneys, a forensic document examiner, and 4 agents to go through it on a conference table in a federal building on North Miami Avenue, with Nora Bennett sitting at the end of that table for all 9 days answering the same question 2,000 times. What does this mark mean? Every pad was contemporaneous. Every pad was dated. Every pad was in the same handwriting on the same restaurant supply paper stock. And the earlier ones had been sitting in a plastic tub in a Hialeah bedroom for a decade, with no conceivable motive behind them. The examiner testified later that it was the cleanest set of contemporaneous business records she had reviewed in 26 years, and that its evidentiary value came from the single fact that nobody had made it for this. 9 years of Thursdays. 240 meetings. 4 men, dated, timed, seated, and twice a year for 9 years, 1 more at the register, paying, in cash on his way out the door. Renzo Fontana had never once sat down at that table. He had never had to. He had simply had to be seen, twice a year, by nobody, by a coat rack, by a woman with a pencil. The dismantling took 29 days, and it went in the order Nora chose. Eleanor Prescott went first because she was the hinge. 22 years, a port commissioner. 9 of them signing inspection waivers for a container yard on 12th Avenue. 4 of them chairing the Marine Conservancy, whose gala she had attended every September in a borrowed necklace. Nora sat across a conference table from her on a Tuesday morning with 2 attorneys on either side and slid 1 photocopy across the wood. "You have until 5 o'clock this afternoon," she said, "to resign every seat you hold and hand your calendars over voluntarily." Voluntary's the better version. I'd take it. Nobody offered my father the better version. Prescott looked at the photocopy, then at the woman across the table. "I'm sorry," she said. "Who are you exactly?" "I served you arroz con pollo at a chamber breakfast at the Biltmore in 2019, said Nora Bennett. "You asked me for more coffee twice without looking up." She resigned at 4041. The Ashford collapse took 11 days and Nora had nothing whatsoever to do with it, which turned out to be the sweetest part. When Prescott's calendars went in, the Conservancy's donor structure came apart, and 3 generations of Ashford money proved to have been moving through the same Coral Gables entities, and the accounts froze. Camilla came to the house on Palm Avenue in the rain in November with nothing prepared, which was the first honest thing Nora had ever seen her do. "They took the house on Lucadendra," she said. "They took my mother's. You're handed it at 21 and you sign where they point. Nobody tells you." Her hands were shaking. "1 word from you." He'd listen to 1 word from you. He would, Nora agreed. "Then say it." Nora looked at her for a while through the gate. "On the 2nd of August, she said, "you pushed a chair into a woman carrying 4 glasses of water, and then you told a room full of people there was a weather system attached to her. That was a joke. Go home, Camilla. I don't have one." "I know," said Nora, and went inside. Marco Delfino pled in January and gave them the accounts. Preston Wilder, who had been engaged to Nora for 11 months in 2011 and had ended it in a parking structure 8 weeks after her father's arrest, with a speech about his family's position, and whose last words to her had been that she had let herself go since all this started, was never charged with anything because Preston Wilder had never been near anything real in his life. He simply discovered over one winter that his brokerage had restructured his desk, that his club had a waiting list again, and that a certain kind of door had quietly stopped opening. He sent a 5-paragraph message in March about how much he had grown. Nora read the first line and deleted it. Renzo Fontana was taken on a Sunday morning outside a church in Coral Gables on a federal warrant without a shot fired. And what Damiano Vitale had considered doing instead is a thing Nora Bennett never asked about, then or since. And on the 14th of April, in a federal courtroom on North Miami Avenue, Cesare Bruno was arraigned on 61 counts. He was 74, small, beautifully dressed, and he had the pleasant, unhurried face of a man who had never once in his life been asked to account for anything. He scanned the gallery on his way in the way you'd scan a restaurant for a table. His eyes went across Nora and kept going. She stood up. "Mr. Bruno." The marshal's hand came up. The room turned. Bruno stopped and looked at her with complete, courteous incomprehension. "I'm sorry," he said. "Have we met?" And Nora Bennett smiled. Because that, precisely that, was the architecture of her entire life, handed to her one last time with a bow on it. 240 times, she said. Table 9. Thursdays. You take it black with 2 sugars and you send it back if it's been on the burner more than 20 minutes, and you have never once said a word to me that wasn't in order. The gallery went silent. "You took a restaurant on a corner in Hialeah from a man named Thomas Bennett," she said. "You opened accounts in his name and you let him do 17 months for them, and he died 90 miles from his own kitchen. And then you sat down in his dining room every Thursday for 9 years and let his daughter pour your coffee, because you never bothered to learn her name." Cesare Bruno's mouth opened. "I wrote it all down," said Nora. "Every Thursday. In pencil. Dated. Because my father taught me that a ticket is a promise, and he taught me that in the building you took from him." She did not raise her voice 1 degree. "You told your own underboss there was no camera and no paper in that room. You were right about the camera. The judge asked her to sit down. She sat down. She never spoke to him again. But at the door on his way out, Cesare Bruno turned his head and looked back at her. And then he knew her completely far too late, and Nora Bennett let him carry that out of the room. They were married in June, at a church in Hialeah 4 blocks from the diner, with the doors open to the street because it was 91 degrees. Margaret Bennett walked her daughter down the aisle on a heart that had been repaired in October, and had 4 more decent decades of opinions in it. She brought the manila folder from the kitchen drawer. She had added 1 item to it in April, 3 pages of a court transcript, and on the 2nd page a line she had underlined twice in blue pen. Grace Molina cried from the 2nd pew and blamed the heat. Enzo Marchetti stood at the end of the aisle in a suit that had lost its argument with his shoulders and wept openly and dared anybody to say a word. Salvatore Conti, 80 years old, gave the blessing. Most of it was in Italian. The part in English was this: "This family buried a son and trusted the man who sold him and learned nothing from either. For 9 years we sat in a room and could not find 1 piece of paper. And there was a woman standing 4 feet away with a pencil the entire time, and not one of us ever asked her a question." He looked out over the church. "So remember what she did with 9 years of being ignored, and then think very carefully about how you speak to anybody who brings you a cup of coffee." Nobody laughed. That was the point. Nora wore red, her father's red, a real one the color of an awning on a corner in 1994, structured to the body holding its line all the way down, and she had not taken in 1 inch of it to make a single person in that church more comfortable. The building on the corner reopened in September under its original name in white letters on a new awning, with the flat top rebuilt and the 11-inch gap by table 7 widened to 34, because Nora Bennett had been complaining about it since she was 19 and now signed the checks. Grace Molina runs the floor. There is a camera over the register that works. And there is a framed order pad on the wall by the door, dated the 14th of April, in pencil, with nothing on it but a name. So that is the story of a woman who spent 11 years as the least important object in the most important room in the county, who was mocked in her own father's dining room, squeezed past laughed at, and paid by the hour to be furniture. They talked in front of her the way you talk in front of a coat rack, and they were right that nobody was watching them. They were only wrong about one thing. She wasn't watching. She was writing it down. And when it finally came apart, it came apart in daylight in the exact order she chose, out of a plastic tub under a bed in Hialeah. Because the woman nobody thought was worth noticing had been noticing all of them for 9 years. If Nora's reckoning gave you chills, hit that like button and share this with somebody who loves a heroine who takes her own power instead of waiting to be handed it. Subscribe for a new full-length dark romance every week and tell me in the comments, Camilla, Delfino, Renzo, or Bruno, which one of them deserved it most.